Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, teachers, students, parents, friends, and colleagues. It is my proud privilege to welcome you to the webinar on mental well-being organized by Pallavan Learning Systems. Pallavan Learning Systems, as most of you already know, is an education research organization. It specializes in creating education centers of excellence and co-creating new knowledge or developing new perspectives so that what we do remains relevant and contextualized. In this context, Pallavan Learning Systems has been organizing a series of webinars involving the students, teachers, parents, and experts. In today's webinar, we are going to discuss mental well-being, a topic which has always been relevant, but has assumed greater importance in recent times. The World Health Organization describes mental well-being as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted or halted critical mental health services in 93% of countries worldwide. The fear and anxiety over the virus has been aggravated by uncertainty brought about by the economic downturn and loss of jobs. The new realities of working from home, teaching and learning online, and maintaining social distance have profoundly affected our daily routine and social relationships. At the same time, lockdown measures, quarantine practices, and isolation have made people more prone to feelings of detachment, loneliness, and depression. This webinar is going to look at the concept of mental well-being, both from the lens of science and spirituality. In doing so, it hopes to understand some of the basic causes of mental unrest, as well as identify simple but powerful activities and habits that could improve our overall mental hygiene. The panelists for the webinar are two very distinguished people. Geshe Lagdor, he's an eminent Tibetan Buddhist scholar and author who has served as the English translator to His Holiness the Dalai Lama for long years. He's currently the director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives and head of Science Education Project. He's also the chairman, Education Council and Advisory Committee of the Central Tibetan Administration. He serves as a member of the advisory board of the Institute of Tibetan Classics in Montreal, Canada, and an honorary professor at the University of British Columbia, Canada. We are honored to have you with us, Geshe-la, and I welcome you to this webinar. Our second panelist is Dr. Monisha Akhtar, a licensed child, adolescent, and adult psychologist, psychoanalyst located in the greater Philadelphia area with 35 years of experience. She's the founder of the Indian Institute of Psychotherapy in India and director of the Indian American Psychoanalytic Alliance, teaching and mentoring therapists in India. Although based in the United States, she does a lot of good work in India. And today she's joining us from Philadelphia, where it is early morning. Monisha, we are truly privileged to have you with us. Welcome to this webinar. To the audience, I would like to invite you to participate through chat as much as possible. Please post your comments and questions, and we will bring those questions to the panelists towards the end of the session. Whatever platform you are viewing the webinar on, our team will be keeping a lookout for your questions. So now let us begin by inviting Geshe Lagdor to speak on what mental well-being, mental health, or mental hygiene means in Buddhist psychology.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saroj Thapa, for introducing today's webinar. And my greetings to my co-panelist, Dr. Monisha, and moderator, Dr. Saroj Thapa, the teachers, students, staffs, and everybody who is listening to this webinar. I had the privilege of visiting the Pallavan Institute a few times. So it's wonderful to participate in this program organized by the Pallavan Systems of Learning. And it is very befitting that Pallavan is organizing all this series of webinars to help people when they are encountering this pandemic and experiencing a lot of stress, fear, and so forth. So I will be speaking, let us say, for around 6 minutes, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, around something like that,
yes.
For each of the topic. And so briefly said, I would, explain this meaning of the word health or mental health or mental hygiene, things like that. In Tibetan, we have a very good term for health, which is called thotin, which means using or resorting those which is congenial to you, which is suitable to you. So whether it is your mental way of thinking or whether it's the food that you take, whether it's the way you talk to people, way you lead your life, everything should be suitable to you for your growth, for your well-being, for your happiness. So whatever is not suitable is not good for your health, physical as well as mental. And this reminds me teaching by, I think, Nagarjuna, who said that a person who always eats congenial food will never get sick. I mean, that is in terms of the physical health. Now, that physical health, according to Buddhism, is very much related to mental health. In fact, mental health is the most important thing, but at the same time, also the most neglected thing. So, Dr. Saroj, you're right to say that we are now showing more attention in this desperate time because there's no other way. So, this in that sense, so this is really a good opportunity, during these challenging times to go within. As some of the scholars they say, the more you're asked not to go out, the more it gives you an opportunity to go inside. And the Tibetan and also in India, the ancient great sages and practitioners, there was no need for them to practice social distancing. They would automatically distance yourself from the ills of the society. So it may be the pandemic of negative emotions, it may be the pandemic of bad thinking or whatever. So they used to retreat themselves and go into the forest, into the mountain, and then go within. Instead of going out, they would go within themselves and explore all the inner resources, including wisdom, compassion, and so forth. And it is because of such voluntary solitude and isolation, they were able to come up with all this, ceaseless wisdom, which we are fortunately able to use today. So therefore, mental health or physical health basically means balancing. In Buddhism, we say, and in Tibetan medicine also we say, that disease or illness comes when because either you have imbalanced the 4 or 5 elements by which your psychophysical aggregate is composed, or it is because of the excessive presence of the 3 negative emotions, which is ignorance, hatred, and attachment. So therefore, you need to either balance the 4 elements, or you need to, basically it's saying the same thing, or you need to uh, make the 3 faults, the hatred, anger, and attachment go away, or at least make them remain in a dormant state at our ordinary level, because it is difficult to get completely abandon it. So health basically means a balanced state of your mind. a balanced state of your body. Your body gets ill and sick because the four elements are imbalanced. Either the fire is stronger than other elements, or the wind is more strong. If the wind is more strong, probably attachment will arise. If the fire is more strong, then there may be fever and things like this. So it's very, very clearly mentioned in those texts. So therefore, now this is therefore it becomes a very important issue now. Now the four elements, the fire and air and things that we use, comes from the external four elements. So first, the one of the contributing factor for the imbalances of the internal five elements is also because of the pollution and the deteriorating situation of the external environment, which we should really be worried about now, because the destruction that we do to the environment is much more dangerous than the COVID-19. For COVID-19, we at least have some hope that vaccines are coming out, although there's not much certainty how long it will, cure and things like that, but at least there are cure. But when we reach a state of total environmental destruction, then one injection cannot solve that problem. And this is, so therefore it is very important to balance your physical and mental health. It is important, first of all, to ensure that there is a balanced growth of the external four, five elements also, which is a huge amount of task to do that. And each of us have that responsibility. Now, at least at the individual level, even if the external elements are disturbed, but still through your mind training practice, through your practice of mindfulness and meditation, you can still balance your four elements within yourself by cultivating positive attitudes. As soon as you develop negative attitude, then of course your whole being is disturbed and you cannot have a proper health. So the important thing that I really want to say now is the problem that we are facing, whether it's the COVID-19 or any illnesses or any societal problems that we are facing, is because of our improper process of education. The so-called education that we are giving today is primarily based on the literacy, reading, writing, and mathematics. It is really not targeted towards human flourishment. Human flourishment means that you should give an education which is able to, cultivate and nurture and bring out the best in each and every student, each and every individuality. So which includes loving kindness, which includes compassion, which includes wisdom, and the most important thing is which includes, the positive attitude towards all sentient beings and with the having the wish to help everybody. So those kind of elements are missing, unfortunately, in our, or missing, or at least this is not so, taken so seriously. That's the problem. And the reason is human beings are very fond of playing with what is visible. Your body is visible. Therefore, you are not good in taking care of your body, but at least you do something. But the mind is invisible. It is colorless and shapeless. And therefore, you don't pay any attention. You may attend a teaching, you may attend a talk, you might think this is good, but then when it comes to implementation practice, you fail and you fail miserably. We don't do that. So now, in a positive tone, thank God, this COVID-19 is teaching us that unless you bring the solution from within yourself, you cannot solve any problem, including the COVID-19. Now, with this COVID-19 experience also, what we have seen clearly is it is because of lack of loving kindness and compassion. The leaders don't pay much attention to the people who are dying and suffering. And the society at large is also not paying enough attention to, help each other. And it is because of this, people, suffer from depression, people suffer from fear, and hardly anybody to trust, hardly anybody to talk to. So therefore, the problem that we are facing is, not just the COVID-19 problem. The main problem is mental problem, the fear, and then also the infodemic, as you say, the wrong information that you are getting. And then you get the impression as if this COVID-19 is individually coming to, searching and coming after you. That's what we feel. And therefore we are suffering unnecessarily. So much of the suffering or problem that we face is not just because of COVID-19 or any other illness and disease, but primarily it is mental problem. So therefore, we need to develop a mental outlook which is realistic, which is true to the way things are, and which is not fabricated. So I don't have much time to elaborate on this, so maybe we'll get some time to speak later. So I'll stop here.
Okay. Thank you so much, Geshe-la. Now, let me ask Monisha. Monisha, how would you define mental well-being, looking at it through the prism of modern science? Is it similar or very different from the way Geshe-la defined it?
First of all, I want to thank you, Saroj, for inviting me. It is my extreme deep honor to be part of this panelist with Geshe-la. I'm extremely honored. And it's a very interesting question. And I think I was taking notes when Geshe-la was speaking. And I think there are a lot of, the point of similarity is that we want a balanced state of the mind and body. I think from a psychological perspective, we can agree on that, right? But from a psychological perspective, what we find is typically when we looked at mental well-being, psychologists examined it from the presentation of symptoms that would come up, for example, anxiety, depression, somatic symptoms, behavioral problems, schizophrenia, things like that, and then would try to find answers for that and treatment of that. It has only been in the recent several decades that we have begun to look at mental well-being and what constitutes that, right? And from that perspective, what has emerged is that early development, right? Early development and the way a child attaches to caretakers and their capacity to then move on to society. I think we all agree that, and Saroj, you introduced this earlier on, this idea of being a productive member. So now of society. So what we look at is what helps the child develop socially, emotionally, cognitively, and psychologically in a collective and individualistic way, but with certain aspects of the external world and the internal world. So there's an internal world that has to, that meets certain developmental tasks that are asked of it at different ages, right? For example, adolescent developmental tasks are different than the task of a 5-year-old who goes to kindergarten, let's say preschool, or a child who's 7 or 8 years old is becoming part of a group. So there are internal pressures and internal conflicts you can think about, or anxieties that an individual experiences developing. And to the extent that they can understand that, to the extent that they can live with it, tolerate frustration, be able to have delay of gratification, have empathy, self-reflective functioning, resiliency, being able to modulate their emotions. This is part of what we hope for a child to get. But the challenge is this, is that there are external factors along with the internal pushes for certain developmental tasks, which are contextualized, you can say, in a cultural setup, but also in a familial setup. And they have some universal kind of trajectories. That there are also environmental factors that can pose challenges. For example, one of the things that we look at, and I specialize a great deal in, is working with very traumatized individuals. Traumatized children, traumatized adolescents, traumatized adults who come to me presenting with a variety of symptoms, and they may not even know that they've been traumatized, but they have difficulties. They have either they have very severe kinds of illnesses such as dissociations, or they have severe anxieties, or they have insomnia, they cannot work. So our goal is the realization is that there are external factors that are constantly in conjunction with internal factors, creating set of, for the individual to achieve that balanced state of mind and body is challenging. So when I see a patient, although in a very first session or second session, I'll say to them, I said, you're having difficulties feeling comfortable in your own body. and I think this goes to Gishala's point, is to get a balanced state of the mind, to have purposeful actions, to be intentional, to function in life with compassion, to be related to another human being, to be able to connect with another human being. So in psychology, what we look at is what are the barriers to that kind of connection, that kind of functioning within oneself, the self-reflective functioning, and what are the barriers to connecting with the outside world. And whether it is an individual, whether it is with society, whether it is with a group of people. Now, it's also important to remember that not everyone exhibits the same pattern of connections or internal reflections. There are variations in that. So if you have a child, for example, or an individual who is more introverted, you can say, more, or what we call sometimes a little bit more internally oriented, they connect in a different way. They learn in a different way. So I think that the psychologists and a function is to really help the individual work with what, and I think this, we agree on this point, with what the internal world is and what the external challenges are, and can they find their own place in a balanced way, tolerating frustration, being resilient, because life does present challenges along the way at different stages, and this is one of them. The pandemic is a huge challenge to families and individuals. And can they bounce back? And can they bounce back with minimal? We will all experience some aspects of symptoms. To be depressed at times when the world is suffering and people are suffering is not a bad thing. Depression is not a negative thing. It is severe depression that gets in the way of our functioning that becomes something we need to be concerned about. But to reflect on the state of humanity, as Gisela is saying, is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think the idea that all depression should be removed is not necessarily a sign of mental well-being. We have to be able to sit with some feelings which allow us to have compassion, to have empathy, to recognize that we live in a world, we're connected to each other. And as Gisela very rightfully said, we live with nature. To have that kind of thing. This is where I think in the Western, because psychology, a lot of constructs have come from here, I sometimes struggle with the notion of happiness and what it means, because I think that that gets very, confused in the thinking as to what is, because happiness is defined in different ways. But I would definitely agree with Gisela that a balanced state of mind and body, being able to achieve a state of comfort within oneself, within one's emotions, one's mind, one's fantasies, and also be able to work in a purposeful and intentional way with the outside world would probably be my definition of mental well-being. And very challenging in times of the pandemic, because entire families, individual internal worlds and external worlds are so, disrupted at this time.
Thank you so much, Monisha. I think that you really, brought forward what Geshe-la said, and you synthesized it with what, as a psychologist, how you view mental health. So now that we have heard both perspectives of science and spirituality on what mental health is and its importance, I would like to invite both our speakers to discuss how the COVID-19 situation has aggravated mental health issues. What are the main issues and concerns, especially with the young student population? What could be the long-term effects? I think we really need to ponder on these. We need to discuss these, and then maybe we can come up with solutions. So maybe, Gisela, would you like to go first?
Okay. So now we are talking about a really, really big issue, something that we cannot solve quickly, because in order to deal with such, issues, we need to have a wider and larger perspective and understand the reality of human life itself, and understand the nature of the psychophysical aggregate that we have itself. Now, if we look at the psychophysical aggregate itself, at least from the Buddhist viewpoint, that if you look at your physical body itself, this physical body itself is of such a nature that it is susceptible and prone to all kind of illnesses, of course, including COVID-19, all kind of illnesses. And the so-called happiness that we try to develop is not so much from the body itself. It has to be sought from somewhere else, either from temporary pleasure from outside or some other kind of fleeting happinesses from outside, or maybe through the mind. But body, the nature of the body itself is that it is prone to illnesses, sicknesses. So we need to first of all understand that situation. That's why, because of this, the Buddha compared the physical body as a foam, as a water bubble and things like that. So very, very fragile. We need to understand this. Once we understand this fragility, then we need to understand that I want not only happiness, but long-term happiness. But given the nature of my psychophysical aggregate, especially the body, it's really, really fragile. So I need to take care of it. We have to have that conviction and that understanding. If you don't have this understanding and pretend that everything is okay, if I have do some exercise and get some good food, and when I'm sick, take some medicine, then everything will be all right, is absolutely a misplaced trust. So it's very important to know that. So therefore here it is important to know, when we experience like COVID-19, problems and things like that, one thing that we need to know is, we are talking about COVID-19 right now because that is the thing that is bothering us most right now. But otherwise, in the society, look at all kinds of pandemics of bad friend, terrorism, raping and killing, and people dying from other diseases, in one day, I don't know how many, if not millions, how many, several 100,000 people are dying every day if we maintain a counting of that. So from that point, it's in a way a little bit frightening, you see. But there's nothing to, get frightened if you understand the situation. Then you will be able to understand that the most of the problem that we are facing is not just because of the body, but because of our negative attitude. In Buddhism, we call it negative emotions of anger, of jealousy, of hatred, and most importantly, the ignorance. Ignorance, not just lack of knowledge, but misconception of the reality. And it is because of this perverted confusion, misconception of the reality, that we develop all other kinds of negative emotions. Yes, there is a little bit disagreement, I think, between science and Buddhism, because according to science that I know a little bit, all emotions are necessary. There is nothing called negative or positive. That's why they come up with this famous phrase, which is called fight and flight response. If you don't have these negative emotions, you will not be able to run away. You will not be able to fight. You need these negative emotions. But in Buddhism, we talk about, completely reducing and completely getting rid of the negative emotions. Still, maintain your sanity. Buddha is the classic example. He's somebody said to be having no negative emotion at all, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have this, empathy and compassion and love. All this is possible. So I think this is a very important point to be noted down. But even if you like make a distinction, as Dr. Monish has made, a different difference between depression and severe depression, things like that. But from that also we can know that any of these negative emotions, if they become more than what is needed, let us agree for a moment on that level, more than needed, then you are going to get big problem. So therefore, we need to come up with a education system where these negative emotions like anger and jealousy, with proper, now I'm glad that Pallavan has this research, practices also. So we need to do a research, let us say the destructiveness of anger. And we have to be honest with anger, if it is really, really useful, okay, we can have it. Okay, unbiased research and see how good anger is for individual, for the society, for the nation, for the whole world. And then similarly attachment, similarly ignorance. So therefore, the point that I'm really making here is two things, as I briefly mentioned earlier also. Now, when we say I'm scared of the COVID-19 or things like that, what we are saying is I don't want any of this disease, any of these problems. I want happiness. So when we talk about happiness, we are talking about mental satisfaction. Having done the right thing, having lived the right life, you have this total satisfaction and calmness. That is called happiness. And that is determined in terms of the level of the mind, and not so much on the level of the body. But the problem that we are having, especially in the modern world, is we are paying so much attention to this body, and thereby anything that is material outside. And that is how the market and the business and everything, the countless productions that is made, the science and technology, all this are result of our paying too much attention to the physical, the material, and not paying attention to the mind. So when we, despite all this science and technology and seemingly beautiful material development, in terms of actual peace and calmness and tranquility of the mind of human beings, I doubt whether we are better than some generations before today. Yes, physically, externally, yes, you look good, everything looks good, but but in terms of genuine satisfaction or happiness, I have a big question about this. So at least from my point of view, if we need this long-term solution, including this problem created by the COVID-19 right now, what do we need to? We need to learn from this. Again, we have a big problem as human beings. Human beings' memory is very short. I always, when I talk about short memory, I always think about the elections in India, You elect one party this year, and then after 4 years, next party, then after 4 years, the same next party, you forget already what they have done before, right? So similarly, I am very, very scared that if the vaccine solves some of the problem, then in the name of normalcy, we'll resort to all the unchecked behavior, negative behavior, and inviting other pandemics, other diseases, and so forth. Now it is scientifically, proved and explained that more than 60–70% of the human illnesses and sicknesses, including the COVID-19 that we are experiencing, comes because of our, negative relation, negative behavior with other species, other animals. So we need to, if we really want to get a normal state of life, we need to change our behavior relation, not only with human beings, but with the whole environment, with the whole species of the birds, animals, and things like that. We need to realize that this world, this earth does not belong to human beings alone. It belongs to the whole, species of, not only human beings, but animals, birds, and so forth. So through that way, we need to develop this understanding that as we both of us has agreed that here also we need to develop this balanced way of life towards everything. So in short, coexistence and things like that, right? So that's all I want to say right now. Yeah.
Right. That's that's a wonderful discussion. That what we are looking at is a mental health issue, which comes from the imbalance that we have created within ourselves and also in relation to nature and everybody else around us. And what is that internal factor and what is the external factor? We may disagree from the point of view of psychology and from the point of view of Buddhist philosophy, but it is agreed that it is the imbalance that creates the problems. So when we have these imbalance right now, Monisha, would you like to talk about what could be the long-term effects? What could be the effect on the young students as well as maybe parents, the elderly, everybody, in fact? I mean, would you like to talk about that?
I want to pick up from where Gisela so wisely, I'm so accurately pointed out that it's all about the mind and the body. It's in the mind that the work gets done, right? And I think that I have a deep respect because that is where I've immersed myself in understanding the mind. The point of disagreement may be as to how we deal with what goes on in the mind. That may be from my psychological perspective. So I think that what is, the attention is now very profoundly, and for good reason, on the pandemic. So let me cast the lens of it being a traumatic event, right? If it's a traumatic event, and I deal with a lot of trauma, people have all kinds of emotions, all kinds of emotions. And Gishla, you're right. I don't label emotions as being good or bad. In the mind, we feel all kinds of feelings, good and not so good feelings that our bodies don't like and we want to reject it, etc. In the mind, we can feel anything. But I make a distinctions between mind, the emotions, feelings, and actions. Actions have to be thought about, actions have to be intentional, actions have to be purposeful. So that's the distinction I made. So when we're dealing with something traumatic, we're talking about this, right? So that's one distinction. Now, what are we saying when we talk about what's happening in a traumatic situation? What do children need? What do people need in general, if you want to go across? They need a stable living environment. They need to have adequate food, proper nutrition, right? They need to have, children especially need discipline. Even adults need like a routine in their lives, and also physical exercise for children and young people, and even for older people, being able to go out, socialize, meet each other, for children to play with other children, to go to school. These are very necessary functions for development, social, cognitive, emotional development in life. That has been interrupted. So in a variety of ways, as you said, which pointed out, we have children are not able to go to school. We have hybrid learning. We know how children, and young adults, etc., are using videos and computers, and we don't quite know what the impact of such heavy exposure to hybrid learning through, computer use will have on the brain. We don't know. We don't know in terms of the impact it'll have on attention. We don't know the impact it'll have on concentration. We do know that that's where school learning all around in the world, that's how it's occurring. It's having an impact on families in terms of financial impact, social structures. Families are finding themselves feeling very depressed and anxious. There is an increase in marital conflicts. People are taking it out on each other. So why is this happening? Why is this happening that this is now going into such action? That is something that one can think about psychologically in terms of that when people are afraid and when things are uncertain, and if their internal structures for ego resiliency and modulation are disrupted to a point that we all have a threshold, so to speak. And if that threshold is crossed, and everyone's threshold may vary depending on a lot of structures that have developed during their lifetime, the work that they've done, including the use of meditation, which I think is a very powerful tool to be able to go in oneself and being able to build resiliency. These are very powerful tools, but there are many different aspects of how one can build resiliency. So once the threshold is crossed, so to speak, and that may vary from family to family, from individual to individual, age group, gender, etc., that people become either very, feel very debilitated, get very angry, feel frightened, feel very confused, disoriented, and that's when it starts to get into action. Right? And right now, as you, Gishla, you pointed out, if we don't have a system in place that is helping us manage that, there is an increase, whether it is at the family level in terms of the support structures, in terms of parents' mental health, in terms of societal information or misinformation, and in terms of what schools are willing to be able to help the children understand. Too much information is not necessarily good, but also accurate information is necessary. One of the things I've begun, because it does have social impacts and economic impacts, everything is being disrupted. One of the things I use with my patients, and this is trying to bring in what you talked about, Gishla, is this whole attitude of being able to live with nature, right? And we'll get into this in the solutions when we talk about this, is being able to think about, caring and sharing. I use this word care and share. So you care about someone, you care about a plant, you care about an animal, bring in other aspects of one's functioning that allows we share a space. This is something that just simple things like that, which we instill, and we'll talk more about that in the solutions thing. But you have to remember that there is a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't know what's going on in terms of the vaccine. We know there is something around the corner. We don't know what the long-term impacts of this will be on children, especially when they have this disruption. A lot of parents think that young children, because they cannot verbalize and they cannot, they think that they don't understand, they don't feel anything. But that is not true. Children do feel afraid. When they see their parents, when both parents are at home or they're fighting, or the parents look depressed, parents are anxious, children feel afraid. And that'll come up, for young kids in terms of behavioral problems or stomach aches, or they'll act out, or they'll get into trouble. Right? With older kids, it might be a little bit different. They might talk to friends, they might form a group, they might get into deviant things. All kinds of problems can come up because they cannot tolerate, or they cannot conceptualize, or another word that I use, mentalize the kinds of emotions that they're feeling because of external stresses, a lack of management, a lack of communication from external sources as well as internal. So this kind of uncertainty and the loneliness that comes with it, and the sadness, and the and the feeling of the financial insecurity, and the tensions in relationships, and not knowing when it will end and when will life go back to normal, has created a profound traumatizing impact on individuals. And I see that in cycles in people that will cope for a while, and then suddenly they'll hit a slump. And then you'll cope for a while, you'll hit a slump. So coping mechanisms, developing, holding on, thinking, finding different ways to be able to conceptualize it, to be able to understand it, to be able to live with what we have around us. And to, this is we have, as Gisela pointed out, we have dealt with a lot of traumatizing situations in the past. Think about the children who are children of war, who come, from different situations. People and children have an enormous capacity for resiliency, but we have to build it. We have to build it in the mind and build it in our structures around us. This is where I have the faith that building takes place at both levels, individual levels, family levels, and societal levels. I'll end with that.
Yeah, thank you, Monisha. That was lovely. And, I can see that everyone is busy writing questions, and they all want to know, how should we deal with it? What can be done? And I can generalize one question is that how do we maintain that balance? How do we find that balance? There are different questions coming, but that's the theme, underlying theme, is that how do we maintain that balance? Would you like to answer that, Monisha, first? And then I'll also ask the same question to Gisela. Would you like to go first? Yeah, Monisha? Oh.
See, how we maintain, I got it. How we maintain that balance is a very challenging question, because it really depends on who the individual is, what are their life stories, what is the support structure around them, what age are they coming in, what are we looking at, right? So but let's talk about it from the perspective of the adult. So if you're talking about a family, and we're talking about a family that has children, and they're saying, how do we maintain a balance of this in the mind, and what's going on around us, what's going on? Simple ways. One is, children and families like discipline, structure. So maintain a sort of daily structure that is, by and large, pretty much, set in a sense, with flexibility, but don't make it so rigid as it was in the past where children went to school. Everything does not have to be done exactly that way. You can create a new routine. Introduce playtime. Play is an often neglected part of one's development. So children play and learn a great deal, and it helps us, we know an enormous amount of literature and research on play, how it helps someone develop socially, emotionally, cognitively, interpersonally, right? We develop that. So introducing forms of play, whether it is family time, playtime, board games, simple games, but play. So instead of getting caught up, and I totally agree with you on that, that having a curriculum that is just focused on literacy takes away from the importance of certain structures like play that allows a child to really interact with another human being, but also with the world around them, in their own environment. Helps them learn problem solving. It helps them learn self-regulation. So even introducing play in our daily routine, especially with children and even for adults, adults playing with someone else and with a child, engaging in a game, taking care of plants, taking care of a pet. These are ways of maintaining some sort of balance. Another thing that I suggest is right now, obviously, I don't know how it is in India, but right now everything is on a lockdown here. So people are feeling much more lonely, very, isolated. Social distancing is there. So virtual gatherings, Zoom gatherings, having discussions like book clubs. I belong to book clubs. I mean, creating little pods that people can interact and exchange ideas. That's another way of maintaining some sort of balance in a daily routine. Try not to spend too much time listening to the news. I think cutting down on news time, I tell patients that all the time, just to switch off the news. When we were going through here in this country, in America, I've switched off the news because outside information, too much of it can flood your brain in a way that the processing of information that is relevant to you can get compromised. So shut off the news, just listen to a few things and do things that bring balance in your life, whether it is meditation, whether it is playing with a child, with your own child, whether it is cooking together, involving children in learning what it is. This is a perfect opportunity, as Gisela pointed out, to go inwards, but also with your own family, create routines and activities that bring people closer together. And you can learn a lot by activities that you do together. There is a saying that a family that cooks together stays together. But if you got this thing, so whether it is cutting up onions or when you're cutting up potatoes or cooking together it's like cooking, creating something. Be of service. Gratitude is ultimately, I think, one of the most, empathy and gratitude. The gratitude is an essential thing that allows one to live in this world peacefully. When we are able to get to the point when we can feel gratitude for what we do have, we can live with. It's a part of being able to be resilient about life, right? So developing that, and gratitude even for children can come in very simple ways, in small things, and can develop throughout life. Gratitude, these are very difficult times, but having a sense of purpose and intentionality in what we do, and introducing these ideas of care and share is what I call building ego resiliency. This pandemic is giving us an opportunity, as Gisela very accurately pointed out, to slow down and to think about things beyond our own immediate drive to get somewhere all the time. It's forcing us to slow down. And I'm hearing people going into themselves in my practice with patients in a way that is quite profound. So in a way, we have to, it's a gratitude that we have come to this point and you're doing this program to be able to reflect. But we also have to keep in mind that it stirs up anxieties and fears, and being able to counter that or address that and talk about it, not cover it, but to give real answers and accurate answers as to what is happening with children of all ages and adults, because these are uncertain times. But I think there's always hope and gratitude.
Thank you. Let me now, I'm sure we'll come back to you, Monisha, again, because there are a lot of other questions that people are asking. Geshe, would you like to speak on this topic of how do we maintain balance? Since we have so much of a crisis in hand, what do we do to maintain that balance?
Yeah, this, as I said earlier also, there is no, number one, we need to understand very clearly, there is no quick fix solution, especially of such, problems of such magnitude. There is no quick fix solution. It will take time. So therefore, of course, we'll be talking about this on the last topic, but it's important that there are some, short-term solutions and some long-term solutions also. Now, when we talk about, balancing, we are really talking about, it can be immediate balancing, or it can be long-term balancing. So that primary balancing has to be done from within one's mind. But of course, again, now, how you teach this, depends on what age group you are in the school. You can't teach those ideas to small kids and things like that. For small kids, you need to show your love and affection and look after them and let them play, as Dr. Manish has very correctly mentioned. So those are the needs. But for those of us who are a little bit grown up, we need to come up with a curriculum which essentially, incorporates some very profound wisdoms. I may not have all the wisdoms, but I think I have some wisdom which I borrowed from other wisdoms. So one wisdom is that we should combine our head and heart. That should be the source of education. Combine head and heart means, as the Buddha has mentioned, in one of his sutra, he says, if you have one quality, you have all the qualities in the palm of your hand. And what is that quality? He answers, it's great compassion. We don't need to talk about too many things. Imagine if you have one quality like compassion, which means how nice I can remove the sufferings of all sentient beings. If you have that kind of compassion and empathy kind of thing, just because of the presence of that quality, one quality, you will stop many negative deeds to others. Like you will not exploit, you will not rape, you will not steal. All this will stop. So therefore, what is really, really urgently and most importantly needed throughout our life, whether there's a pandemic or not pandemic, is compassion. Compassion is the glue, loving kindness or compassion. These are the glue which will bring all of us together. And unfortunately, we don't have that quality much these days. We are all, following the individualistic, materialistic society. And with this materialistic way of solving things, we come up with, whether it is medicine, whether it's any other education system, we are all coming with this quick fix solution. If you have a problem with your heart, just operate on the heart. Don't think about the rest part of the body. That is not from my limited point of view, based on the ancient system of thinking, that's not the solution. The solution must be holistic. Take into consideration the overall situation of your whole health, even if there is a problem with your knee or your kidney and things like that. Take into account. So that is one way, a very important way of balancing it. Another important way of thinking is we need to understand the reality, as I said earlier. When I talk about reality, it can be very profound, which may not be suitable here. It may be more relevant for the diehard spiritual practitioners like me, but not for ordinary people, at least at this time for the students. But one thing that we need to really know is, let us, let me give you an example for the benefit of the students, especially. Let us say we are, group of like 20, people, including teachers from Pallavan Institute, then students, and then the officials and everybody. We are going for a picnic, okay? We are traveling in the boat. And suddenly the sea, the water becomes turbulent and the boat is almost getting overturned. At that time, what will we do? At that time, you don't need any teaching from Buddhism. You don't need any teaching from Pallavan, systems of learning. You don't need anything. Because of seeing that, very, very dangerous situation, the turbulence water, everybody will be nice to each other. So if we understand the human life, similar to that example, that we are born, and we born and came into this world crying, no exception. Even doctor from Pallavan Institute, no exception. When we came, the first thing we did was crying, right?
Right.
We came alone. And then finally we die, also we die alone. There may be some friends sobbing and sitting around you, but we have to go alone. So therefore, the long-term solution, and in fact, that is something that we must teach if we are to face all these problems that we are going to face in life, is that unless we cultivate this process of thinking within oneself about the way things are, about the reality itself, all other solutions will be ordinary mundane solutions. Of course, we are talking about mundane solutions, so there's nothing we can do, but long-term solution will not be there. There may be different kings, different ministers, different systems of education. So long as people nurture greed, anger, jealousy, competition, until we die, we'll have this problem, their problem. In fact, the more we go after the material greed, thinking that solution will come from there, the more problem that we are facing today. That's one thing. Another thing with this balancing attitude is we need to make a distinction between the wrongdoing and the wrongdoer. There's another thing which is very important in education system. Whoever is committing something wrong, we still need to develop that compassion and still give the hope that this is also a person, ordinary person like me. I also always, it's question of how big your mistake is or not. Otherwise, we all commit mistake, errors, but that mistake can be rectified. The person can become. There's no need to ostracize that person. So make a distinction between wrongdoer and the wrongdoing. Wrongdoing must be corrected. Wrongdoer must be given the place in the family, in the home, in the society. That's, I think, very, very important. And then another thing is, it's a big issue, big problem today, is as we are facing now, that when you're asked to live alone, social distance, remain in the room, we're having problem, right? No problem may be of different reasons. It may be shortage of food, understandable, but in many cases, it's not shortage of food. It is poverty of the mind, because you have never learned how to live alone. So therefore, another very important point that we must focus is, either you need to learn to live alone, just like the great saints did in the past, or even His Holiness Dalai Lama is doing. Either we need to learn to live alone, or we need to learn to live compassionately, lovingly with others. We are not good for any of this. Neither we know how to live alone, nor we know how to live with others. That's the problem. So now, as ordinary people, most of us will not be able to live alone. So we are compelled to live with others. So there, how would you live with those people? You will be able to live properly with those people with this balancing attitude. Meaning that don't just, you of course think about yourself, but don't just think about yourself, think about others also. Oh, of course you need this material development, but don't just think about material development alone, also think about the internal mental development. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, sometimes call it 50-50. 50 for yourself, 50 for other people, 50 for this life, 50 for next life, things like that. So I think, there's so many things to talk about this balancing. Okay.
Yes, Kusala.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
I was just reading one question in the chat, which says, it's from Gitanjali Rao,
Yeah.
that it is easy to find balance and inner calm when you withdraw from what is happening around you and wander in the mountains. How does one find the balance to be engaged in writing what is happening in society or community, broadly inequality, racism, etc., or among your friends, family, or on the one hand, and your own sense of frustration about your inability to bring about change in the world around you, both very proximate and distant from self? I think you were talking about this, isn't it?
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
yeah,
about.
yeah. So the point is, again, when you confront such situations of family problems and things like that, again, at the end of the day, the wisdom has to come from within. If you don't have this inner resources, inner wisdom, you will have no idea, no way to help solve those problems happening in the family, in the society. So again, it is by remaining alone and cultivating this wisdom, like His Holiness Dalai Lama is doing, right? You will be able to find those solutions.
Right. Okay, I think I'll bring in Monisha. There is a question, I think, because we talked about what we could do with the children to develop their mental well-being. There is a question which says, what are some practices that we can adopt to ensure the mental well-being of the elderly? Monisha, this is from Ashrupona Deka. She says, the elderly are sometimes very susceptible to negative emotions and feelings of insecurity. So what can we do to help them?
Okay, I'll come to this. I just wanted to um, respond a little bit to what Gitanjali's question was, because I thought it stirred up something in me, which was, see, I think that, what we're looking at is, she brought up this issue is how do we engage with the world, which is at so many difficulties, whether it's racism, gender inequality, discriminations, poverty. There's so much going on around us, and then we have this. Is that how do we find that balance and go within ourselves when all this is so challenging? And I think it's a very valid question. I think it's a very profound question, important question. And I think that what we're looking at is to be creative in our minds so that we can engage in actions that is purposeful and intentional. Whether it is getting involved in a cause, whether it is doing something to help, that requires the freedom of thought and action and to be comfortable. But when one is feeling afraid and uncertain, that is sort of disrupted. That flow is disrupted. So we have to, one is examine whether it is with children, adolescents, or adults, what is that flow? What is the hindrance towards that, to free that? That's one thing. And that can be a much more very complicated and profound kind of examination. It depends, it varies. The other thing is to be able to look at the scope of involvement, the idea that we can get involved in everything and change the whole world, etc., perhaps is beyond the reach of most people. Like, however well-intentioned and compassionate one might be, desire is there. We have to recognize our own scope, because I wish to change everything may itself represent something that is a hindrance to creativity that could otherwise find expression in a very meaningful way. That's another thing, and that requires exploration. Now, to get back to the question that you asked about the mental well-being of the elderly, I think it's a very important question, because they are very much at risk, and families are very, very worried about this. I was, with the elderly people, one of the things that is very meaningful for them is to be connected to family. They're very frightened, they're scared. So to be connected to family in a family environment makes them, they need a sense of safety and security. Their sense of safety and security does not come from what it comes for younger people in their 50s or 40s or 60s who are still working, or 30s, who are vibrant, who are able to get around, etc. The sense of safety and security for a younger generation, younger than them, comes from their work, their families, their social life, etc., their mobility, etc. So for an elderly person, it doesn't come from that. They're frail, their bodies are changing, they're not able to engage in the work, they don't have that, they're retired. So for them, the sense of safety and security comes really from family relationships, where they feel physically taken care of, that's the most important thing, and that someone cares for them, that someone will not abandon them, right? The thing with elderly is also that they, you'll find something, I know, I had seen this with my mother, and I've seen this a long time back. as she grew older, the sense of safety was she would keep her purse with her all the time. She would hold on to her purse. And I see that with a lot of elderly people, and I think it's a very meaningful statement. It's like this, that's all they, that's, she said, this is my identity, my little money that I have, my thing. She would hold on to it no matter where she went. And I found that very moving. That the sense of security does not come now from being able to run down the stairs and go outside, because we are mobile, we can do that. It comes from holding on to the little possessions that we have and little rituals that we have, a sense of this thing. That allows us to, for the elderly, to keep in mind that significance of that and the family closeness is not about engagement all the time. It's about keeping some rituals and rituals that allow them to feel safe with what they have. Right? That's a very important part of this, and they're very vulnerable right now. The elderly are going to be they're very vulnerable. How do we, reassure them? How do we take care of them? I tell patients this, and I use this a lot with people, is I think in terms of, actually, it was in my work with the patient that this thought suddenly came to me. Think in terms of possibility and probability. Like in life, anything is possible. Anything is possible in life. The pandemic, we never thought it was possible. Now we have this pandemic. 100 years ago, we had the Spanish flu, right? Exactly the same. Millions of people died very similarly, and people ignored it. People wore masks. 100 years later, we have this flu, pandemic, right? Anything is possible in life. We don't know what's around the corner. So we are living with uncertainty. Now, the question is it probable that it will affect us? Well, that depends on how we maintain a balanced state of mind and body. That's where I totally agree with Gisela, is that this is where is it probably going to affect us? It could. Anything is possible. I don't know. I could go out and maybe I have no idea. But I maintain social distance. I wear a mask. I try to maintain a peaceful state of mind. I do my work. I take care of my plants. I take care of my pets. I maintain some social contact with people that, I have like-minded, with family members, virtual gatherings. So I limit the physical things that could come in that might affect me. And I also try to keep my mind balanced and engage myself in a self-reflective way. So the probability of something happening increases when you start to decrease some of the things that need to be attended to, right? And I think Geshe is right in saying that when we live to keep a balanced state of mind, we are constantly titrating these things because the world is changing rapidly, right? So how we titrate it is an ongoing function, but a learning function that starts from very early in life.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Gisela, I think this is one question for you. It is Arindam Das who says, since a child is born compassionate and remains so till the adult society in large comes into the picture, rather than emphasizing on educating a child, how we can re-educate the adult on compassion and ethics?
Exactly. In fact, this is a very good question. And in fact, I was actually already started thinking about it. You see, when we talk about dealing with many of the social problems, including the problems faced by elderly people, as we already discussed, and please remember this, for any problem, there is no quick fix solution unless there is a larger process of solving the problem. Quick fix solution, which is the modern way of doing things, will not solve the problem. Now, what is the larger process of solving the problem? The larger process of solving the problem is these issues of having proper ethics or morality, as you rightly cautioned. And if you don't have this morality or ethics, which is basically talking about the basic spirituality of kindness, compassion, and things like that, if the society is deprived of these things, then your so-called education, expertise, whether it is going to help the society or harm the society is questionable. In many cases, people who bring a lot of turmoil. For example, look at some of the world leaders today. And that's the point I wanted to make. Yes, we have to accept the fact that it's not possible to have a world where it's no problem at all, but we can have a world which is relatively peaceful and calm, provided if we have those who are, at the helms, those who are leaders, who make decision, who decide our fate, more or less. If these people are compassionate, their mind is balanced, the society will be relatively peaceful and harmonious. But look at the situation right now in the world. How many stupid world leaders are there? Whose job is to play politics, whose job is to create, the segregation and division. Oh my God, it's something that we see every day on the television. Not just one leader, many leaders. Now we cannot blame these leaders alone. From where these leaders came? They came from the community, they came from the society. When the society itself is such, then we have people who vote and elect such leader and who are ready to die for such stupid leaders. There's no shortage of those group of people. What will you do now? That's the problem. That's the problem. So therefore, it's really, really important to teach this ethics in general. Now here, ethics, when we talk about teaching, ethics, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama has, been saying, they're not talking about teaching ethics based on one particular religion. Religion may be good, but in many cases, religion also becoming a dividing factor. So therefore, it may be slightly better to talk about spirituality or social emotional learning or secular ethics or human values, universal ethics, whatever you want to call it, something that goes to everybody, like being honest, like being compassionate, without which, even if you are atheist, without some kind of love, without some kind of patience, without some kind of friendship, you can't simply survive, you can't simply exist. Forget about being happy. So we need to really, really focus on these issues. It's not that we are talking about these fundamental, values for the first time. It is actually in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is in the law, rule and law of each and every government. The government rule never says kill people. It says don't kill people, don't steal. But when there are people who are stealing, people who are killing, we don't pay much attention. There is no honest rule. You can bribe and get free. So therefore, the long-term solution is preparing the younger generation, giving them good guidance. The short-term solution is, yes, you immediately help somebody who is in need of food and things like that, but that's not the long-term solution. So we need to really think about developing that kind of appreciating that fundamental human value and developing those universal kind of ethics and values.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I know we all need to do a lot of work to build that balance. And like you said, there's no easy solution to it. It's a long term battle that we need to fight, starting with children and give them the best input possible so that they grow up into compassionate adults who will bring about better peace in the society, more harmony. I know that is really, that's really important for us to take home and take with us as a takeaway from this webinar. And also, I mean, there are so many questions. So many people are asking about what can we do. Maybe this is the last thing we will take. What happens if we find there are friends or people around us who are depressed, who are losing their mental balance at the moment? And what should we do? How should we respond to that? What can we do to help them? I'll ask this to Monisha, and then I'll ask this to Geshe, and we will conclude with that.
Okay. See, I think that when you see someone who is suffering, refer them to someone who's professionally able to help them, to speak to them One is if you see a family member and you find a parent who is really, with children, the symptoms of isolation and grief and it will differ. Children may have more stomach aches, headaches. Young kids, teenagers may isolate themselves from their own. They have a lot of video chats, etc. May become a little bit more defiant, and all kinds of other things that we see. In adults, it may be different, fighting between couples, and you see that happening. Refer them for treatment, refer them for help, ask them to talk to someone, talk to them first, but don't try to address that, don't take on something that you may not be, that'll affect your own mind, in a sense, right? This is because in our line of work, we use our mind to help another person find balance in their mind. If our mind is not able to process what is happening outside us and being able to listen, then we create another issue. It's not going to help with this thing. So that's why it's better to see someone who is trained, who can look at the signs, see what is causing the depression, the anxiety, the somatic symptoms, the strife, and find solutions and help them in a more, what I call, in a more crisis management situation, which is different from long-term work, which I think Ishla is absolutely right. Long-term work is very different, starting from childhood, etc., how we build those. But immediately, you can look at more crisis management, so at least you can stabilize and then find what is triggering and advise them, and the therapist or someone can really either work with them or help them move on. I see that happening a lot here. There's a lot of people who need immediate management, something that they have not addressed, anxiety symptoms, panic attacks that suddenly come back, depression symptoms resurface. So keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be long-term treatment, but crisis management is a very helpful way of helping someone see that this is something they can attend to, and they don't have to have it for the rest of their life. People get afraid of thinking of a lifetime kind of thing. No, it isn't. It's about really seeing what's going on and finding a way to balance themselves again.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you. Geshila, could you also?
Yeah, one thing that I want to tell here is that as ordinary individuals, we have this interesting habit of always focusing and highlighting more on the problems and making more complaints than highlighting the good qualities that you have and other people have. I think we need to change that attitude. Let us talk not about all the bad things. That's why you are right. Dr. Manisha was right not to watch this news repeatedly. She's absolutely right. You see, so therefore, what is important in life is think about all the good things that you have. Similarly, all the good things that other people have. Focus more on that. Cheer up each other, encourage each other. So that way you will be able to create a much, much, much happier society. Now we have a few minutes, so I wanted to tell you this very short story. Once I was giving a public teaching in Moscow in Russia. So I was talking about this importance of appreciating the good things and not talking about the bad things and not keep on complaining. So there was an elderly Russian lady sitting in the front row. She said, Gaishila, I am an elderly Russian lady, living alone, staying alone, nobody helping me. So what is there with me to appreciate? So then I said, I'm sorry to know about that, but I can see that both of your eyes are intact. She said, yes. And your hands are also intact. And you are a human being, not a dog, not a cow. She said, yes, that is true. So we have so many good things that we have, especially this wonderful human intelligence. Think about these good things. The other day I was reading a book which says the way to highlight yourself and see your importance is from the fact that whether it is the nature or the God who produced you, you are the only original copy in the world. There is no second of you in the world. So that means you have that very unique talent, very unique capacity. So think about that. Use that. So that I think is another very, very important thing. Then the second thing is, as I said earlier, We need to be, when we confront these difficult situations, we need to be realistic. As Dr. Manish also mentioned, that we cannot hope to solve all the problems, right? So therefore, the great Buddhist teacher of the 8th century, Shantideva, he said, if it is something you can change, don't worry, because you can change. The change may be through you or through the help of some professionals, as Dr. Manisha, recommended. If it is something you can change, even if it is difficult, don't worry, because you can change it. If it is not possible to change it, no use worrying. By worrying, you can't change it. Do something else. Such a wonderful wisdom. Many a times we just waste our time thinking about things where we can't do anything. So therefore, it is important to make a distinction between worry and concern. Concern is you take responsibility. Worry is just you are wasting time on things that you can't do anything. So therefore, this is very important. Then, at the end of the day, I really wouldn't wanted to mention this one. When you try to help anybody, your motivation must be good. Motivation must be pure, and then realistic. As somebody truly said, that if your motivation is good, if you have this genuine love, then love is a quality which the blind can see and the deaf can hear. It's really magic if you have that genuine love. And if you have that genuine love, and if you're realistic, then to a great extent, you will be able to deal with many of your problems and problems of others. But if you don't have this internal quality and only have that professional knowledge, which I very much appreciate, then just like we are seeing, for example, in America and many places, the nurses and the doctors, they're suffering from compassion fatigue. They are professionals, but they don't have many of these internal qualities. So, forgive me to say this, they don't have this. So therefore, they are suffering from this work fatigue or compassion fatigue or whatever you call it. I compared, when I heard about this people suffering from compassion fatigue and things like that, I compared it with the mother anywhere in the world, illiterate mother, uneducated mother, educated mother. Majority of these mothers don't suffer from compassion fatigue. They don't have any of this professional training, but what they have is genuine love for their children. And I've seen mother whose child may be like ugly and not so good looking, but mother, the showers, all the praises to our child, that my child started walking, my child started speaking, my child started laughing, She highlights all these wonderful things. And love, of course, as we say, is in the eye of the beholder. Absolutely true. If we are able to develop this one quality, like love and compassion, with a realistic, approach, that means seeing the reality, because there can be things you can't solve. There can be things you can't do. There can be things you can do, you see. So then you will have no problem. Otherwise, as Dr. Manisha clearly mentioned, that in the name of helping somebody, you might get stuck there, you see. It's not easy. So therefore, you need to really develop this internal resources to be able to help others. Okay, thank you.
You're muted, Saroj.
I can't hear anything.
Yeah, I can't hear her.
Saroj,
you're muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. No, this is amazing. We had a wonderful discussion, and this is lovely. Would you like to just give a message to all the viewers, all the listeners, all the participants, 1 minute each?
You want me to go? Or?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, please. Yeah.
I think that I love what Krishna said, is to have love and compassion. And I would just add to it, have hope, keep hope. Hope is, we find hope in little things. The very fact that when the snow melts and I see the first daffodil buds come up and the leaves come up, it gives me hope that spring nature never fails to yield to us and to give to us. And the trees start to blossom and the trees start to bloom. Despite the pandemic, my garden was one of the most beautiful things that I ever spent time in, because I grew a lot of plants and I grew and they grew. Hope is there. We are going through difficult times, but hope is there. And it starts with our daily practice. It starts with keeping in balance in ourselves, self-reflective, and caring for others. Taking care of others and sharing our space with others. This is what I would leave it with. Thank you so much. And Gisela, my pleasure and really deep honor to be with you.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
beautiful, beautiful, Manisha. Gisela, one last minute.
Sure. I would like to tell my friends, no need to worry. Unlike the past, we have quick information, quick communication, and vaccine is coming very soon. Nothing stays forever. Things change every time. Don't focus too much about the past and the future. Live in the present, enjoy your life, and be happy. That's very, very important. And then finally, I would like to make this, cite this quotation. Ships don't sink because of water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. Don't let what is happening around you get inside you and wear you down. Thank you.
That was profound. Thank you so much. That is really profound. And so this is an amazing evening with two very eminent speakers from very different perspectives, spirituality and science. And we come from different basic understanding of the concept of mental well-being. But philosophically, as well as psychologically, the advice that we received, the suggestions for coping with situations or developing mental health are so similar. Thank you so much, Gisela and Monisha, for sharing your wisdom and advice. And I hope that we will be able to work on this advice. I mean, like Gisela mentioned, it's easy to know, but to practice is the difficult one. And if we are able to work on this advice, and safeguard our mental well-being, or rather even become better at it so that we can all work continuously towards actualizing our own potential. I think that would be really, really great. That could be the best takeaway from this webinar. Thank you everyone for your active participation through chats and for posing so many questions. It was not possible to answer everybody's questions, but I tried to group them together and ask generalized questions as much as possible. But I hope you are satisfied. I hope your questions were answered. So here's wishing you all a very good mental health and a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.